Inspired to imagine and to create a vision for Greater New Haven, our wonderful arts community, which is internationally recognized. I'm Ray Andrewson. I am the General Manager and Morning Host for AM 1220 WQUN, a commercially licensed station owned by Quinnipiac University. And it's a great joy to see so many of you here today, so many friends, and I'm glad to see people who are reconnecting here today. And that's what the arts community does for our town of New Haven and beyond. I would like to, first of all, give you just some basics of what is going on with our program this afternoon before we introduce Will Ginsberg from the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and start our panel discussion. We'll be having our panel discussion and then a performance. Before we break up into groups, we'll be asking you to come with us to other venues and roundtables to share some of the ideas surrounding the questions that we'll be discussing this afternoon. We really value your input. Please stay for that, and please, we want to hear from you if we can. Also, you came in today and heard the wonderful group from Music Haven. Let's give them a wonderful round of applause. And also, you probably had an opportunity to see the sculpture from the Metropolitan Business Academy as well. And if you haven't had an opportunity to stop by registration, you got here late, whatever, you were texting a friend about the arts in New Haven, whatever you're doing, or posting something on Facebook, please stop by registration if you can. You'll get the packet, the pen, and also the breakout group number that you'll be assigned to as well. Let me ask you a few questions. First of all, how many of you are artists who are attending today? Great. How many of you are arts attendees? All right. Arts donors, funders? How many of you approach the arts as a teacher, a professor, an administrator, someone in education? We're going to keep those hands coming up. How many of you are interested in theater? Dance? Music? The visual arts? Arts and education from kindergarten right through 12th grade. How many of you don't know why you're raising your hand? For a minute there I felt like Richard Simmons. Well, this is a great format for all of you to participate in today. Allow you to get updated on current trends in the arts, new initiatives, some of the challenges, opportunities, and also to go into these groups later on and back your community here at home and imagine the possibilities, inspire others to become involved, and invest time, talent, and treasure for the arts. It's now my pleasure to bring you the Chief Executive Officer, CEO, President of the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. Will Ginsberg will describe why we're here today. Will?
Thank you, Ray. And how many of you thought you were coming here for a bar mitzvah class today in the wrong room? Okay. So good afternoon to all, and thank you all very much for joining us today. A special thank you to Congregation Mishkan Israel and to Rabbi Herbert Brockman for hosting us today. I haven't seen Rabbi Brockman, but thank you to him and to this congregation. A special thank you to our live blogger table, Paul Bass from the New Haven Independent, and fellow bloggers from the Independent and from the New Haven Register and from the Education Center for the Arts and from WNPR. And if you'll permit me, a special thank you to the board members of the Community Foundation who are here. I saw Chip Long, David Newton, Jamie Cohen. Am I missing anybody? Well, thank you to them and to the whole board. In planning this afternoon's convening, our hope has been to bring together a cross-section of people from Greater New Haven who treasure the cultural life and cultural resources of this community and who believe that our cultural resources are important to the vibrancy and to the vitality of life here. Looking around this room at all of you this afternoon, I feel that we have done just that. Our hope has also been that each of you would come here today having thought about why you feel this way about our cultural life. Certainly it's about entertainment, our performing arts, our visual arts, our museums, the ways that our history is preserved and displayed all around us. They bring the world to us. They exposed us to some of the great achievements of humankind. They celebrate who we are and where we've come from. They make our lives here more joyful, more educational, and more fulfilling. But for all that the arts do for each of us as individuals, I submit that we treasure our cultural resources here for deeper and broader reasons. The arts are an integral part of what defines us as a community and what brings us together as a community. Why do I say this? Well, surely creativity is one of the hallmarks of this community. As rooted as we are in traditions, ours is also a community that has always pushed the envelope to think about life in new ways. Indeed, that is itself one of our traditions. While our creativity takes many forms, architectural, entrepreneurial, scientific, it is the arts that brings us together to express and to celebrate that creativity. And it is the arts that bring us together to celebrate our diversity. And it's in these ways that the arts truly express who we are as a community. The idea behind this convening is pretty straightforward. That by learning from one another, by sharing ideas, by working together, we can both strengthen our local arts institutions and in turn use the arts to build a stronger community. We believe in this idea of working together, and the Foundation is going to be doing other convenings on other topics as well in the coming months. I was asked the other day by one of our panelists whether what we're really doing this afternoon is preaching to the converted. And of course, in one sense, yes it is, because all of you do care deeply, as Ray's show of hands demonstrated, about these issues, or you wouldn't be here. But the point really is that we're not here to preach at all about the importance of the arts. We're all already there. We're here to bring our collective wisdom to bear to support the arts in a forward-looking way. Let me thank, too, the many arts leaders and donors who contributed ideas and helped in our planning. We held several focus groups. And I want to really thank the Foundation staff who have put this event together for us. This is a first for us. Many staff were involved. I'll mention a number by name: Trish Caldwell, Christina Ciociola, Lee Higgins, Sharon Capetta, Dottie Weston Murphy, Angela Powers, Penny Canny, and above all, the leader of our merry band, Jackie Downing. Where's Jackie? Where's Jackie? So this is an unusual arts event. We are not here for a performance, although we are being treated as some very special artistic talent, but for what I call an informance. We're here to inform one another in ways that will help us to imagine what the future of the arts in our community can be, to inspire others to engage with that future, and ultimately to invest in that future, whether that be of time or energy or money. This may be an unusual gathering in that sense, but in another way, this is really an old formula. It's a proven formula. This arts community was built on imagination and inspiration and ultimately investment. The visionaries, for example, who created Long Wharf Theater almost half a century ago, did so by envisioning what a world-class regional theater could mean to this community. 15 years ago, that history, a little more than 15 years ago now, that history repeated itself with the International Festival of Arts and Ideas, which emerged from the imaginations of 3 visionary women and has inspired many others, the Community Foundation included. Or think about the Greater New Haven Arts Stabilization Project, which inspired $5 million in public and private funding to help 8 local arts organizations build stronger systems and build financial reserves over the last decade. The Community Foundation is proud of our role in these 3 signature arts endeavors over so many years. But these are really the tip of a much larger iceberg for us. For over 80 years, the Foundation has supported arts institutions, large and small, old and new, in this community. We have supported arts for its own sake. We've supported the arts as an educational strategy. We've supported the arts as an economic development strategy. Reflecting our community's values, which is what the Foundation does, the arts have been an essential part of what we are. And this record of grant support is, of course, the flip side of our work with our donors. Over these 3 generations, the generous and committed donors who have built the foundation have sent us a clear, consistent, and unequivocal message of support for the arts. This is as true today as it has ever been. In recent years, several of the largest gifts to the foundation have been to support our arts institutions and our cultural institutions, including, of course, last year's $20 million bequest from Richard English, 90% of which will support the New Haven Symphony, the New Haven Museum, and the Neighborhood Music School. Today, as always, the arts confront a changing and challenging new landscape. Shifting market forces, changing audience patterns, changing public policies. At the same time, here in our community, we have the institutional strength and the individual commitment to find the opportunities in these challenges. And our panelists, and I thank Cindy Clare and Mike Kachuba and Josh Bornstein, will help us do that this afternoon. And then, when we break out into our smaller breakout sessions, you all will help us do that too. So again, thank you all for being here. We very much look forward to hearing your thoughts and your ideas and to working with you, not only this afternoon, but in the future as well, to continue to strengthen our community through the arts. Thanks very much.
We'd like to introduce our panelists now. We're going to have about a 25-minute, 30-minute discussion with our panel up here, and before we have a performance of art, and then, of course, we break up into our groups. First, I'd like to bring in here to talk on our far end of the table tonight, Joshua Bornstein, who's the Managing Director of Long Wharf Theater. Welcome. And right to his right is Cindy Clare, Executive Director of the Arts Council of Greater New Haven. And Mike Kachuba, he's also a songwriter. You have a long one here, Mike. This is wonderful. Songwriter, master teaching artist, education consultant from Young Audiences, Arts for Learning, Connecticut. For Mike. And first of all, we'd like to say that these questions will be used in the breakout groups that we have later on. And I think what I'd like to do is start with you, if I can, Mike. We'll go right to you with the first question, because we're talking about many schools around the state of Connecticut now that are failing to make standards, tests, staggering achievement gaps that we have, dwindling funds, balanced with improved test scores in some areas, lower drops in numbers elsewhere. Our first question tonight, what is happening, what else can happen with arts and education, urban and suburban, and how can we ensure that the arts are included as assets in education reform efforts?
Well, in order to even begin to answer that question, I think one of the things we need to do is define what we mean by arts in education, or arts education. There are different approaches. I mean, there's what's called the standard-based approach, which I hate that term. The idea of the traditional, I prefer to call it a traditional approach. You know, the music teacher, the art teacher, visual art teacher in a typical school setting. So that's one approach to arts education. The other approach is arts integration, which typically would involve using a visiting teaching artist working in conjunction with a classroom teacher to teach whatever that subject matter might be, but using the arts as a vehicle, as a methodology for teaching that subject. And the third system that you see in arts education would be the visiting artist who comes into a school, perhaps not necessarily to work collaboratively with a classroom teacher, but perhaps to work on a short-term project or something, kind of in conjunction with or in addition to the other arts education that's going on in the school. So those are the three traditional ways. And the President's Committee on Arts and Education back in 2011, in their reports on arts, revising arts education in America, basically talked about making those three systems work a little bit more collaboratively. So finding a way that you can have visiting artists come into the school, either for those special projects or to work in arts and education, but also to work in support of the existing arts programs that are already there in schools in a more traditional sense. The other thing that was asked for in this study was basically to increase the role of teaching artists in schools around the country. And there's been discussion with that too. What does that mean? And does that mean we're going to have a, some sort of certification program for teaching artists? And there's lots of discussion going along those ways. So those are some of the recommendations from that report. What you'll find is what's happening around the country. Places like Big Thought in Dallas, I saw it there mentioned in the toolkit that you have. And in Dallas, what was happening was essentially all the arts teachers were being dismissed. And so Big Thought comes in with the idea of bringing teaching artists in and being able to supplement what was happening in the Dallas school system. Their focus is on arts education completely, and they work in many, many different ways throughout the city of Dallas, not only in school, but in after-school programs as well. Here in Connecticut, you have something like Hartford Performs, which is a program now on its third year. And in Hartford Performs, again, arts is the focus. Looking at schools that have had either lackluster arts education or no arts education at all, and bringing in teaching artists to either do arts integration, provide arts experiences in some ways for the students. And that program started 2 years ago with 6 schools. It's now up to 12 schools, adding 6 more schools, 18 schools, and in 5 years their plan is to be in every school in the city of Hartford, including high schools. And what they're doing right now is working towards arts integration. The idea is bringing teaching artists in to work in conjunction with classroom teachers. And it's been working really well.
I'll take it a different direction slightly. We hear about it's an either-or scenario when it comes to the arts and funding from the state level. We know that we live in an era of diminished resources and not a lot of money to draw upon. But anecdotally, you'll read consistently that music lessons equals better math performance. How do you get the word out to lawmakers, to funders, and tell them that there isn't an either-or, that it's together?
Well, I think what is the idea of research-based work, and I think what you're seeing now, again, we'll go back to Hartford Performs, where they have a 4-year study, 3-year study going on right now. Dallas Big Thought, they had a study that works, and their research is there, and that's why they're getting the support that they need. Hartford Performs is getting money from Board of Ed and from Prudential because of the fact that they have this study going on. And I think in the past, what might have happened is that there hasn't been a lot of studies. It's been more that anecdotal. Studies take a long time.
Now, on a local level, Cindy, what have you seen? What have you heard that relates to this in terms of education?
Well, in the New Haven Public Schools, they have a new partnership with United Way to do wraparound services. And this provides, I think, a new opportunity for arts organizations who offer after-school programs. There's been a couple of pilot years, and this year, I believe, was the first year that some arts organizations were able to partner with schools. I hope that there will be more funding and continued advocacy on the part of arts organizations for the value they bring in an after-school setting as well. You heard Music Haven kids on your way in here today. Music Haven does a tremendous job working after school with kids, and yet that type of program right now is not being funded by Boost. I'm hoping that moving forward, Boost is adding 5 new schools next year, and I'm hoping that we can create a dialogue with the Board of Ed, with United Way, to make a case for what the arts do for kids, not just with regard to academic, but also what the arts do for self-esteem, for school attendance. All of these things are proven in a lot of studies nationally.
Do you find that with the local school administrators, do they tell you that it's challenging to go before a Board of Education? It's challenging to go to even parents, perhaps, and make that case?
You want to take that one then?
Put it right at you.
I can tell you that from my experience from going into different schools, I think a lot of it depends, on principals, on the principal in the school itself, to buy into that program. I was speaking with a school in Bridgeport recently, and the principal there is a theater person. She has a theater background, and she would love to see nothing more than have her entire school based on arts in education, arts integration especially. And it's a difficult sell for her, especially where the school's located, given the funding and things along those lines. But when you have a principal who sees the value, it makes it a lot easier to bring it to a superintendent and go from there. And sometimes it just seems like administrators forget what it means to learn, and what ways work.
They got a degree.
Well,
So I think a big part of it is the emphasis on testing, right? So you have this discrepancy between the need to perform, to get your students to perform at a certain level on CMTs and so on, versus the 21st century workforce, soft skills that the arts teach us, such as public speaking, creative problem solving, those kinds of things, which are not easily testable. So part of our case has to be emphasizing the need for these other things which maybe you can't test for, but are really critical if America's going to compete in a global workforce, and Connecticut for that matter.
And, Georgetown Long Wharf Theater, you have a lot of college students, you have high school students, you have programs, you open up the doors down there at Sergeant Drive to so many people and students who learn. I mean, this is where they sort of catch the bug. It may be at the high school level, but they really have that reinforced through Long Wharf Theater.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, certainly they can come see plays, but us, like many of my colleagues here, we have other kinds of arts education programs as well. We do in-school residencies, and we just received a grant to quadruple the number of in-school residencies we're going to be able to do. We've been doing professional development with teachers to integrate arts-based techniques in the classroom for many years now. We started the program 5 or 6 years ago. But to that point, I think one of the things we may need to do as a community is just take an assessment of what's already here, because certainly we're doing stuff in the symphony and the ballet and the music school and music haven. I mean, there's so much already going on. It would be very helpful to understand what's happening and what's the impact of the programs we're already doing. So then we can further understand where can we have further investment and where can we make the greatest impact in arts education here.
So there's a multi-platform way of finding what's going on, but it might be hard to find it.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on in Hartford right now. With through Hartford Performs, one of the things that they're doing is looking at ways to support not only the current, more traditionally based arts programs in schools, but what's happening in the community. So there's a survey that's been developed. The idea is, how to get that survey out, find out what communities are maybe rich in arts and which communities are poor in the arts, and young audiences. We have 6 of our artists who are involved in the Hartford Performance program, and it's a great way to kind of expand not only what we're doing, but to help out in a community like that. And it's a tough problem, to find out who's actually using these services and where they're getting these services from.
Well, that's how we develop the interest, I guess, through education. But now the question, our second question really is, how do we get everyone to come to build it? Now, how many of you are devotees of American Idol? So you can tell our panelists here, or Dancing with the Stars, one person, okay, good. That's it.
You just don't want to.
They don't want to, I know that, that's true. So now think about it. We live in an era of American Idol. I don't know how many panelists up here can raise their hand. And you can, so you can think you can dance, Dance with the Stars, everything else that's on television now, commercial television. How do you ensure that attendance and support for the arts continues? Not from television, but live performances, galleries, everything we have to offer here. I mean, how do we get younger, new audiences here? And I think of Long Wharf Theater. Josh, I'll start with you to answer this.
Well, I'll speak not so much from Long Wharf Theater, which would be disingenuous for me to say we have younger audiences, but instead, although we're working on it. I think, but for my roles before I was at Long Wharf, I was a consultant with AMS Planning and Research. We did a big national study on arts participation, and we did a lot of work on arts engagement. There's really two elements to that question. One is that the nature of arts engagement is changing, and some people are looking for more active kinds of engagement. And there's a very good study by Alan Brown, which I think is entitled Just Why Engagement Matters. And he talks about the 6 levels of engagement. One is the most passive. He calls it being a reader. You might just go to the play, maybe read the program note, but then you're done with it. And he talks about critical responders, people who read the reviews before they go. Then he talks about people who are informal conversationalists. They'll talk with their friends and family after they see the play. Then he talks about the technology-based people who are blogging about the theater, people who are tweeting about the theater, or the arts in general. I'm going to rely on theater because it's my background, I'm sorry. And then he talks about the next level of engagement, people who are the seekers, the knowledge seekers, people who go to pre-show and post-show discussions, that kind of thing. And then finally, people who want to be active participants. And you can engage on any level of the spectrum there, and you can also engage in different art forms in different ways. So you may be an active participant in music, you may be a musician, but in terms of your theater going, you may be a reader, for example. And one of the implications of the study is that arts organizations have to figure out how they can engage people in different ways with their medium. And that's, I think, a huge shift for a lot of organizations. Longworth, certainly we have some of those elements, but we can certainly make strides to be more, create different avenues for participation. The issue about younger audiences, we did this study called Culture Track, which was a big national study which had over 4,000 respondents. And there is an audience, there is a younger audience. The challenge is that they tend to be small. They're only 5% of the population. They're urban. And they're samplers. So many of us in the performing arts model have relied on subscriptions. Younger audiences don't do that. They may consider a play just as they would consider going to a museum or going to a concert. And the concert might be classical music, or it could be a pop concert or a rock concert. And so because you're competing now with so many more options with younger audience members, it has to be a pretty compelling value proposition. And that's where the work has to happen in terms of developing that younger audience. The last thing I should say is that arts participation is, there is a life cycle to it. So you may participate in one kind of arts participation as a young person, but then once you have a family, you tend to engage in the arts through your children. And then once they're teenagers, they don't want to talk to you anymore, then you might re-engage without them. So there is a cycle that we have to acknowledge. There is a donut that people may go on their own, but once they have families, they'll engage with their families and go on their own again after the children get older or leave the nest.
Cindy, what have you seen from your perspective at the Arts Council? It's a different world.
It is a different world than when I entered the world of arts administration some years ago. I think one of the most interesting trends that I'm seeing is this attention being paid to what has been called the pro-am movement, which is a growing recognition that there's a wide spectrum of arts participation, as Josh just said, and that at one end of the spectrum are the amateurs, are people who may not have any kind of formal training in the arts, and yet they participate in a very, very active way, sometimes alone in their bedrooms, or in a garage band, or sometimes participating as part of a community band or a community choral group. But these are people who participate actively in the arts. They may not participate with any formal arts organizations, with any of the mainstream arts institutions, but they are kind of, in my view, the low-hanging fruit. And how we engage people beyond our patrons, our consumers, our board members, and widen the circle, I think, is really, really key to our future as an arts community.
And Mike, in terms of professional artists, bringing them up and connecting them, I mean, how do we start that at an early age, or as Cindy just mentioned, those who come to it at a later age?
I do believe very strongly that art is creative, and you have to develop not necessarily an appreciation for it. It has to be a natural act, and I think beginning at preschool, even before that, the idea of exposing kids to the arts in any form or fashion that you can. That doesn't necessarily mean taking them to the theater or taking them to a museum, but doing things at home, doing things in the school setting, just to kick off that start. It has to be a natural part of what they do. I mean, I can tell you from my own experience. I mean, my first musical experience goes back to when I was 3 years old. You know, just listening to records. Remember what those are? You know, and always singing around the house. And it was, to to me, it was the most natural thing to do. Unfortunately, I think what happens with the media is that with shows like American Idol and things along those lines, I think it does just the opposite of encouraging people, and I think it sets up barriers. So we have to become a culture that appreciates the idea of playing in your garage or whatever it might be. And I do think schools are a place to really enhance that.
And making it approachable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And fun.
It's ironic that we're meeting here today because this evening, the International Festival of Arts and Ideas, once again, will tell us who's coming here. In June, they're having a little soiree after we convene at 5 o'clock in our circles. I hope some of you will be attending that later tonight. But that's brought a lot of people into New Haven, and I think that's what we'll discuss in this next question and sort of focus in on that. You think of Charleston and Spoleto in that festival. Think of New Haven and the International Festival of Arts and Ideas and what is a draw. And we're talking about New Haven in terms of a community now, the greater New Haven area, not just the city of New Haven, and about some of the federal and state initiatives about what's called creative placemaking, or describe what that means. And Cindy, I'll start with you because you're right at the center of this. What is creative placemaking?
Good question. There's a lot of people in this room pondering that right now. Creative placemaking has become the new buzzword in our field, and it really started a couple of years ago with the National Endowment for the Arts when they launched a program called Our Town. And Barbara Lamb's out there, the former director of cultural affairs, city, and Barbara's project with Project Storefronts was lucky enough to be one of the first Our Town grant recipients. So Project Storefronts, as many of you know, is a project involving artists and creative businesses taking over temporary residence in storefronts around downtown. So Our Town launched this notion of creating great places using the arts. And that mantra was picked up in our state by Kip Bergstrom, who is now the Deputy Commissioner of Economic Development. In July, the Commission on Culture and Tourism in our state was merged with the Department of Economic and Community Development. And Kip, in his new role, developed a new vision for grant making at the state of Connecticut. And his new vision is all about creative placemaking. So there were a number of forums held around the state in January and February, and now we're doing some follow-up conversations around what these new grants will look like, what the guidelines may be. But the notion of creative placemaking, as is demonstrated by another new federal or a national organization called ArtPlace, which made its first round of grants last fall, is again using the arts to bring people together, to create a buzz and activity, and really to make communities very vibrant. In New Haven, I think we already have a lot of those kinds of places. So it may be a new concept in words, but I don't think it's a new concept in terms of what we do.
Now, in terms of a destination, I would think of Long Wharf Theater, Josh, to just speak to it as a destination as well, part of a place. You have just announced a major upgrade, renovation of the facility, which caught quite a buzz a couple of weeks ago. How does that tie in? Because you may have someone coming from New York, Boston, specifically for Long Wharf, but we'd like them to stay and experience all of what New Haven Arts has to offer.
Sure. Well, we try to, all of us try to collaborate and work together as we try to capture people from outside the region. Certainly, we have one of the things about Long Wharf is we have a large percentage of our audience that comes from outside the immediate vicinity. They come either from south of the shoreline or north of the shoreline. And so we certainly all work together to do promotions together and that kind of thing, so that it helps with the buzz. I think when there are events, the festival's a good example, or Citywide Open Studios, another good example of an event that generates a lot of buzz in the community. That everyone tries to do their best to get themselves out there in front of those big events as well, so people can see that it's not just June when the festival's happening, but in fact there's a vibrant arts community all year round. There's a lot of offerings throughout the year.
There is lots going on, and I'm thinking about the youth. I'm just thinking, Mike, about how you connect them to see this place as special. I mean, what can students and what can young artists feel if they have a buzz about staying here and investing their talents in this community?
Well, that's always a problem in terms of when someone looks at the state of Connecticut in terms of affordability and being a place to live. It's difficult. Yet what we need to do is, I love the idea of collaboration, and the idea of creative placemaking is a wonderful idea in the sense that any time we can come together as a community, collaborate on these sorts of programs that make the place just seem a little bit more vibrant. In Bridgeport, young audiences have been very involved in the Gary Crooks Community Center, which is associated with the P.T. Barnum projects. And so what we've been doing is bringing arts into the projects in Bridgeport. We have a wonderful opportunity to do that. We're working at, P.T. Barnum, we're working with Trumbull Gardens and Marina Village as well. And it's starting to catch some attention in the community where people really didn't want to pay attention, but now they're starting to come to the programs more and more. And it's young families that are coming. And so I think that was just a collaborative effort. We had the opportunity to do it. And I think it can be done in Bay, it can be done in any small town.
Well, we have to figure out something major, and this will be part of our discussion later with everyone here. We're quite an artistic community. I think we have established ourselves that way, and I think you'd all agree. New Haven has that reputation, the universities, and also the community that we have here. And it's diverse, many genres, multimedia, many platforms. But the question now is, how do we sustain it? How do we create and sustain diversity, affordability, keeping the arts accessible to everybody? And Cindy, I'll go right back. I'll start with you from the Arts Council perspective. How do you make it? How do you bring everybody in?
Well, it's a challenge. I think everyone who runs an arts organization probably wishes that we can offer all of our programs for free. Unfortunately, that's not a reality. I read with envy a story in today's Times about Brazil has a separate, a private nonprofit entity that is the biggest funder in the country. And its funding comes from a 1.5% sales tax that's throughout the country. And I was like, what a great idea that would be. But those taxes are not a popular topic. No, I think that that is a huge challenge for our industry. We know that pricing is a barrier to participation. And we've got to, collectively work together to find ways to keep our cost down as much as possible. I think that there's been some successful work around back office collaboration to keep some staffing costs down, some administration costs down. But there's only so much we can do to contain cost, and that's when subsidies come in. And we look to the private sector, we look to donors to help subsidize the cost to keep those programs affordable.
And we just went through a round with Governor Malloy in terms of our budget cycle here in Connecticut. And I wonder, Mike Kachuba, if you could talk about how that pertains to education. I mean, there's the funding of the actual programs, arts community itself, but there's also the educational component. Does the dollars worry you?
Sure. Dollars always worry me. Yeah, the idea of what we're finding right now, is coming into a school system, we're approaching a school and everyone's saying the same thing. For example, there's a large urban community in, not New Haven, but in Connecticut that has all their funds frozen. And so you work with them and try to bring the arts programs to them, and they just would love to have them, but there's nothing that they can do about it. So, it's, again, what do? You go to the community foundations, and you look at their forms of trying to make it work for them. It's going to be an issue that we are just going to have to come up with some creative ways of working to make it happen. But it's, I don't know that there's an answer to that right now.
For a venue like Longworth Theater, and we can take it beyond Longworth, but Josh, if you think about different CAPA funding, the CAPA and the Schubert Theater, if you think about an institution like Yale, there's Yale Rep, there's so many other institutions around the places that receive funding from outside the New Haven area, rely on grants from Washington, from Hartford. What do you see in terms of sustaining this, keeping the ball rolling in terms of keeping diversity, affordability, accessibility there, especially as you mentioned, a different era in terms of generating ticket sales?
Well, the most successful national example I can think of is the Signature Theater Company in New York City. What they did first, it was funded by Time Warner, and I believe it's the Pershing Square Foundation. They received an enormous subsidy at the tune of $1 million a year to make all their tickets $25. And that has been extremely helpful for them. To Cindy's point, we do collaborate everywhere we can, but ultimately, just the creation of art is a human-intensive process which is almost impossible to outsource. So at the end, you've got to compensate the artists. You have to pay for materials. The long work we have a facility, although it's not a great facility, we still have expenses to maintain it. And there's always the increase of doing that. So for us, it's about generating revenue, whether it's through, if it's not ticket sales, it has to be through some other form of subsidy like the Signature Theater has, for example. So that's probably the best example I think nationally. My favorite. It's my favorite.
So we are about to conclude this portion of our program, but I just, and it's probably unfair to just ask you sort of a crazy offbeat question for the three of you, but if we were all in the elevator together, which would be kind of frightening considering there's about 200 people in the room today, but if we were in the elevator and you were facing somebody, and Josh, I'll start with you, and you were to talk about New Haven and the arts, and you were to talk to these nice people and say, here we are, what would you tell them in a sentence, 2 or 3, about our community?
New Haven is a small city that has the cultural resources of major cities in the country, and you should take advantage of them.
And Mike, what would you say?
That there are creative people throughout the community, not only in the theater itself, but just walking the streets and people who are creative in schools. And one thing we need to do is bring those creative people to the front and get, especially young people, get them to start thinking more about how they can create.
Cindy, I see our elevator is about to go all the way up to the top. We're about to get out, but we have a couple of seconds, and you have the room. Tell them as Executive Director of the Arts Council.
Okay. Well, I echo what Josh says. We have a phenomenal cultural community with so many different opportunities and ways to participate. So you can take a class, you can watch a play or a concert, you can buy art, you can visit artist studios. No excuse to not be involved in the arts in some way in New Haven, Connecticut.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all. Again, our panelists individually, once more, Josh Bornstein from Longworth Theater, Managing Director. Josh, thank you. And also Cindy Clare, Executive Director of the Arts Council of Greater New Haven. Cindy, and Mike Kachuba, songwriter, master teaching artist, education consultant, Young Audiences Arts for Learning Connecticut. Thank you all, and thank you all for listening.